New tonight, 2 new positive coronavirus cases in Kent County.
The state is directing everyone, stay home.
Rise in deaths just a day after the whole country was put on lockdown.
U.S. cases surging to over 60,000.
Now is not the time to pull back at all.
Hey, let's be honest. This is the first time anybody really has dealt with a pandemic in their lifetime. We've had some smaller concerns with influenza, but this is a more contagious strain of virus than the influenza virus.
I was actually traveling during spring break, and so I came back to announcements that things were going to be shut down, and I was quarantined. I couldn't even come to campus to get materials because I had just traveled. And then I had a child who was ill with pneumonia, and there were no COVID tests available, and so we had no idea, and so then I was quarantined for another couple of weeks. So I was really just at the mercy of whatever I had stored online.
Students were already emailing. They're like, what are you thinking, doc? Hey, are you going to have courses? I'm going, I just got an email saying we're going online, so let me find out more and get back to you.
We knew it was hidden. We knew it was bad and everything. And I think in a way, I was fortunate because I was carrying some online classes, and then I was doing face-to-face.
It was initially a sense of panic for me because as an educator, I've always been about the idea that education is personal. And so not being able to be face-to-face was really scary for me.
From my perspective, obviously initially it was somewhat panic mode, and then the approach that I took was just, okay, I'm not the only one in this situation, what is everyone else doing? And that's really what led me into the whole spectrum of resources that I started to employ within my internships.
Part of the initial steps, I met with our lab coordinator, and her and I discussed how are we going to keep this instruction going.
We didn't know whether it was 2 weeks, 2 months, or as it turned out, the remaining of that semester and most of fall and spring semester for many students.
But when the governor's orders came down, it really became a mad scramble. What do we do first? How do we support faculty the fastest? What's within our capability?
I didn't even take the time to think about it from a, so how does this affect me type of perspective. I immediately sprung into action thinking, how do I save, this semester? How do I accommodate this incredible disruption to our lives in a way that the students still can get something? The students still can learn. The students still feel as if, there was some value in continuing this journey with me.
For better or worse, I lobbied pretty hard to have the trip go forward anyway. And of course, there were no cases whatsoever in Peru. And so our thought was, while this was something to monitor, that Peru was going to be safer than here, since there were 0 cases.
There was conversation with the college, with the university leadership, in making sure that we are prepared, knowing there is a little bit of uncertainty that exists when this travel is going.
We got on a plane, maskless, along with other students here on campus as a study abroad opportunity. So we were lucky to be able to do that during spring break, so then you didn't miss too much school.
We're having the time of our life. I mean, just to put it in context a little bit, we meet with an economist whose name is Hernando de Soto, world famous guy. We meet with this guy in his personal residence. He spends over 3 hours with us, tells us all this. It was just an unbelievable experience. I'm so excited. The students are loving it. I'm spending too much money taking everybody out to dinner where the weather is beautiful.
And then it just flipped in like a day, less than a day, I would say.
I'm in the hotel room, and they come around and put a notice on everybody's door that the borders of the country are closing in 24 hours by order of the Peruvian president. Then the students are slowly coming back from their trip to, you know, one of the 7 wonders of the world.
There were a couple of us who got texts that said our plane was either being delayed or completely canceled, and we weren't sure why.
The students are like, are you worried? And again, I'm like, no, it's not a big deal. I'm like, relax, go to bed, we'll get out of here tomorrow, okay? Mistake. That was definitely not what was gonna happen.
We packed up and we got ready to fly back to Lima.
Then we get on this bus to go to the airport, and there's instantly just this gridlock traffic. And the flight time's approaching, it's approaching. And I said to the bus driver, I said, I don't wanna miss this flight, we better get out. So we get out of the bus, it's raining, we're on a dirt road, and everyone's, you know, dragging their bags, multiple suitcases down the dirt road in the rain trying to get to the airport. So we get in front of the airport, and then where you would enter the gates to get close to the terminal, right, that's closed. You can't even drive in the airport, it's all blocked off.
I feel like this is gonna be a successful trip. Yeah.
I don't even know what to equate it to, but it was like the gates were shut and just people were like flooding in, so it was just like a big group of people trying to get to the airport to leave. We had to like push through the crowds in order to get up front, and then
these cops standing there with the machine guns that won't let us through because I'm trying to convince them that the date on our ticket is legit. I'm screaming at them. I'm having to scream at them in front of the students, which I'd prefer not to do, in Spanish, in the rain, with the suitcases, and they've got their big machine guns. So then finally, they decide to let us through. And they're like, how many people you have in your group? And I'm like, 16. So
one of the security guards like said, all Ferris students like raise their hand, and then we raised our hand, and like people around us raised their hand too.
By the way, the students on the other side of that gate are terrified, right? Because the gate's been closed on them. And so I'm like, you know, if you're in the Ferris group, raise your hand. And everybody in the crowd puts their hand up. It was just such a mess, right? It really was. It was like something out of a horror movie, you know, people pushing over each other, lying, screaming, etc., trying to get just inside the airport.
It was essentially pandemonium at the gate to the airport.
Finally get everybody through the gate.
We quickly found out that they overbooked the flight.
And they get about 5 students checked in, get their boarding pass, take their bag. The airline says, oh yeah, we can't take any more. I'm like, what's the problem? And they said, well, you know, we're getting close to flight time. We have a long standby list, so we gave the other seats away. I'm like, you gave the seats away? What am I gonna do now? What are we gonna have, 5 students in one city and the rest of us here and stuck at this altitude? So I talked to those students that are checked in for the first flight, and I'm like, listen, I just don't wanna take you off this flight. Just get off the airplane and wait for me right there in the airport. It's only our flight. So then what happens? The rest of us are there on standby with everybody else in the city that is trying to get out of there. And I think we got on 3 separate flights. We all get to Lima, and what do you know? Our flight that's scheduled to leave at 12:05 and the border closes at 11:59, that flight's canceled.
And so we headed back to the hotel that we had originally stayed in Lima.
Maybe this lasts a few days. And then it's really the next day. Then it really starts to settle in. Oh, this does not look like it's getting lifted anytime soon.
And little did we know we would be there for almost 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that.
We had a very good relationship with Dr. Cartwright before he left, and we were very comfortable communicating. We had a lot of confidence with his ability to manage crisis.
You know, people's parents are rightfully worried and calling. I'm trying to manage those expectations.
The parents and the family members were a critical element to it, because many of their children have never traveled abroad. This was the first time they're traveling.
There were so many people who were looking after them, and we were working with people in Washington. I was working with our national associations. You know, I was working with the governor and with people from the governor's staff, and they very quickly became connected.
The most important thing of all was communication, to making sure that everybody is informed, everybody is engaged, and people are comfortable knowing, even though it's a very uncomfortable situation, that they are in good hands with the institution.
For the last 3 days we were there, I just had a feeling that we were gonna get on one of these emergency flights, and so I made everybody get up really early, have all their bags packed, eat breakfast, and be ready to go. And that worked on about the 3rd day. We were ready, we had to go instantly. They take us to this military base. We stand out front of this military base, no joke, for hours, 3-4 hours.
And they had white chairs with white tents, sitting us like 6 feet apart. We had to have our masks on.
We've waited on either outside the military base in the dirt or on the tarmac in these plastic chairs the entire day. It's finally dark outside.
And when we got onto the plane
is like 3/4 empty. It's really sad.
So that was really frustrating to me because I knew that without the university, again, I wouldn't have had the money to fly myself home. I wouldn't have had the abilities to talk to people in order to get myself anywhere.
You know, I don't think we believed it would happen until we were on the plane and they actually texted us and said the plane is taking off. You know, that was an emotional moment when they took off because we were worried. We were very worried about them.
We get to the Miami airport at 2 or 3 in the morning, so we sit there in that airport all night, get on the flight to Detroit. Thank goodness they didn't cancel that because it was our group and probably 2 other people on that flight to Detroit. We drove up to Big Rapids, and those students, I told them, I said, I am taking you to your front door. Drove everybody all around town to their front door or gave them to their parents out here in a College of Business parking lot.
And we were so lucky to be a university and to have the ties that we did because I'm not sure I would have gotten out if I was alone or something like that.
We were just so incredibly fortunate that Alex Cartwright and Susan Jones were there with those students because our students had 2 faculty members who really cared about them and took great care of them.
The primary purpose of study abroad is to make you comfortable being uncomfortable. And they got that in many ways, more than what they actually bargained for initially, which is you are seeing a country going through a significant challenge as you are navigating in a different culture, but also at the same time continuing to learn because it doesn't stop because you're still part of a study abroad program.
And who would have thought that I get on a plane to go to Peru and I'm not gonna be able to teach in the classroom again for a whole year. That the students I left before spring break, that's it.
If you were to pull anyone aside, pull me aside and tell them a pandemic will happen in 2-3 months, 2-3 weeks, they'd freak out.
It was really stressful. It definitely wasn't what I imagined my normal college experience was going to be like. It definitely kind of turned everything upside down.
It was kind of exciting and new. I honestly didn't mind it because I didn't have to be up hours early before class, but I did miss my classmates and my teachers quite a bit.
Early in March, when we saw what was happening in Washington State, and then we started watching even in Ohio, we started noticing an uptick of things around. And even prior to that, you know, we were having conversations just within the health professions areas around watching what was happening in China and trying to figure out what do we need to do. And so we were sharing information just about what we knew, and which was very little then, now in retrospect, and trying to figure out what would we need to do. So we created the emergency task force, which really was, how do we deal with this when it comes on campus? Because we knew by that point in time it was going to hit campus. We just had to figure out what to do. The only answer became that we needed to close, at least for 2 weeks, to try to figure things out. And that was our initial onset. So there was a group of individuals that really looked at how do we close down campus, knowing that we still had some functions we had to keep open. So I say close down, but we never really closed.
Oh, give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. And if that isn't a great example of what it was like learning during the pandemic, especially I'm in a house where I've got 2 younger siblings, so all 3 of us were in school, and by younger I mean my brother's in elementary and my sister's in middle school. So they had to learn, just as everybody else, on how to do online stuff.
It was a little tricky, you know. When I got moved back in, I had to share a room with my other 16-year-old brother who was also in college courses. It sucks because I have a family of 6 and I'm grown up. You know, a lot of my other siblings are too, and we're all forced back inside of a home, and that was tough.
Because we didn't know, we sent everyone home. Well, when we tried to do that, we did find out there were a lot of students that this was home. And at that point in time in their life, they really didn't have a place to go. So we ended up with about 250 students on campus through the whole pandemic. The majority of those lived in West Campus apartments. We did wellness checks on them. We helped them with food.
We had several students still on campus that had basically this was their home. And we actually, through the time, because it ended up being a several-week period that we were taking care of the students that remained here, we started basically making almost like grocery bags for them so that they could cook on their own. And we supplied some students with some cooking pans and utensils that might not have had them when COVID first hit.
I think we were all surprised. I mean, in retrospect, of course, I probably should have seen it coming or at least anticipated that this could transpire. But no, I didn't foresee this virus impacting our lives the way it has in the last, 15 months.
You kind of had to do what you thought would be most available, what would make it the easiest at that time. And even we didn't have Zoom license. In those first days, we didn't even still know what Zoom was, most of us. And so, I just sort of went into, I know how to teach online, I'm just gonna switch to that. And I'd been planning the class online, but I was still working 15 hours a day. I was still working 4 or 5 hours a night, filming videos, editing, publishing, looking through, watching them again, looking for mistakes. I don't know how the people who had 4 classes to do did it.
Creating that community, I think, was one of the biggest challenges, and also feedback that students gave. They would like to be in a group. They would want to work together. And so I think that's what we focused on.
So we've got these people that don't have access, whether they're faculty, staff, or students. We've got people who, live in places where they've never had access. So how do we help get them what they need? And we have faculty members who have only taught in person. So how do we get them the resources they need to be able to teach?
One of the things in e-learning is we're very tech savvy. We like to go above and beyond. And in those moments, we went, what's the bare minimum? What do all faculty need right now from us? And how do we provide it? I remember in a phone conversation with the representatives from Zoom, I was asking them about dial-up and whether or not students and faculty would be able to use their phones, their home phones, their landlines to dial in for these meetings. And one of the gentlemen chuckled and he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You don't understand. Our students and faculty still live in very rural areas. They don't have high-speed internet. They don't have, a lot of the technology that we have on campus, and we've just sent them all home. And it's not just the students, it's the faculty as well. And so we've got to provide tools for them that require the lowest amount of bandwidth."
We live about less than 10 miles from campus, and we live in the middle of the woods. Either my husband gave his lecture or my daughter did her assignment and I worked at night because we didn't have enough internet to manage for all 3 of us at the same time.
Broadband was a huge issue across Michigan. And so we actually worked with Verizon and AT&T to get MiFis for a low cost and distributed them ASAP so that at least at the short term, we were able to give access to the students who required that broadband capability.
I go to Zoom University. I think you can ask any college student right now and they're getting their degree from Zoom University. It's been an incredibly useful tool. I don't know what we would have done without it in the past year, but it's obviously not how I would prefer to go to school.
To be honest, I'd never heard of anything like Zoom before, before all this started. So that was an interesting piece for me, and it was definitely a learning curve for me. But I've learned to make those adjustments, and I've been fascinated to see in the students that I teach and work with that are becoming teachers, that are doing observations or pre-student teaching or student teaching, to see how they've adapted in their classrooms has been phenomenal.
I had the opportunity to be a kindergarten in a kindergarten school for my 40-hour observation when all this was going on. So our schedule first started out just online. So it was 17 kindergartners trying to figure out how to log onto a Zoom, how to stay logged into a Zoom, how to mute themselves, and how to do all these things. And it's a challenge. I think that you lose a lot of education time with them because you're just trying to help them so much figure out how to stay online and be online. I also honestly learned a lot how resilient kids are, because they can figure out at 5 and 6 years old, figure out how to do this.
At the time, none of my classes were synchronous, so all it was just emailing and Canvas, and that was really complicated for me. I never really did good with online classes in that way.
To be honest, that time, like when I doing the Zoom class, I don't like it. I mean, I hate it, because when they're doing the Zoom, like I can, if I'm tired, I can just lay on the bed and doing the Zoom, but like I can't focus, and I can't learn anything if I'm doing that.
So the hands-on approach virtually was kind of fun to think about how are we going to do this. You know, we had to, I guess, shift our thinking. We started asking students to get creative, and we got creative ourselves as well with how can I deliver this content to you. I mean, I know I had, you know, needleless syringes that I was showing on camera. Okay, this is how much we would draw up for this particular dosage of medication. You know, a lot of us were doing assessments on family members. We had students doing it on roommates, family members, whomever they were able to be quarantined with at the time.
I was working at the Racket and Fitness Center, so you know, it was, I think, spring break. We, you know, halfway through that week found out the students weren't going to be coming back. So for me at that time, I was teaching fitness classes in person there, as well as, you know, overseeing our front desk staff. So it was a quick pivot for me at that time of figuring out how do I move my fitness classes to being online.
Good morning. Happy Monday. Hope y'all are doing well.
I did that for the remainder of the semester, and then at that point is when I was laid off for the summer, and you know, it was a big unknown of, I didn't know if the Racket Center would be opening in the fall, if I would have a job to come back to.
Once the pandemic started, I had I think 3 jobs on campus, and 2 of them just didn't need me to work because they didn't have anything for me to do online, so I lost hours of work. So I definitely had a financial problem there.
Even if, you know, coming into last year, you thought you had a pretty good grip on understanding what uncertainty meant, I think last year sort of challenged you in ways that you could not have anticipated, which is truly the definition of uncertainty.
There were a lot of levels of impact because it was the students first, of course. It was my own experience with them that was going to change dramatically, and how was I going to adapt to that. And then it was our clients and customers out there who we create content for that were impacted as well. Everything got shut down. What we shifted to was something where students still continued to produce content just individually from home using the very limited tools at their disposal, which means, you know, the evaluation is entirely different because they don't have the tools that we provide them with here to be able to do some of that storytelling. The live experience was gone. So, I mean, working as a team, rotating through those positions that they would have, otherwise that was gone. But we shifted to a, you know, individual storytelling, one camera perspective.
Being a senior this close to graduation, it's hard to feel like we haven't been robbed of some sort of rite of passage, but on the other side, it is kind of interesting that we get a lot of opportunities and problem-solving challenges that nobody else will.
Started off at school, producing Ferris Sports Update, the live show, working with each other in the senior editing lab, being able to bounce ideas off of each other, and now we're working from home.
The last semester of TDMP is supposed to be difficult, but I feel that this made it 10 times more hard.
I know you guys are gonna do great, and I know you're gonna kill it in life. But with that being said, we faded to black.
To their credit, they embraced it and adapted, and I was really proud of them for doing that.
So we made a flip really quickly as an institution, but then we had to figure out how do we sustain it. And then as we got to the point where we started to bring more people back, then it became how do we do that safely?
When this first started in March, everybody was, oh my God, what do I do? And then it became, what can I do? How can I help? What little piece can I make?
Well, basically, right when school was canceled, I knew that we were going to run out of PPE just because I'm a nurse and I know how much equipment we go through. The face shields was going to be the first thing that we're going to run out of, basically. And that was the one thing I could make. It was interesting because it really did become a collaborative effort. People were coming up with different designs, and I knew the next stage of this because, unfortunately, these little 3D printers, this takes, like, if you're good and you really get your machine dialed in, 15 minutes to print one of these. I just knew the pandemic was not going to go away, and I'm like, we got to go to the next level. So I reached out to my old mentor, my prof, Clayton Rye.
Who was a professor of my daughter, knew me through that and knew that I worked at the plastics program.
And I was like, hey, do you know anybody still that is involved in the plastics department over there? Because I know they have those injection molding machines and I know they're probably down.
Spoke with Kevin on a Monday morning and decided we were going to get an injection mold made for the face frames.
And then he said, I've got a blank here if you want to come pick it up. And the blank is just what I thought was going to be about a shoebox sized piece of steel cut in half.
It's a 1,000-pound chunk of metal. We originally had thought we would fly it down.
And I was like, oh, that's not going to fit.
So I called Big Rapids Towing.
The fact that Big Rapids Towing, you know, I was like, I'll take your die across the state.
By Monday afternoon, we had a 1,000-pound chunk of steel down in Lapeer, Michigan to start being cut.
So up in Lapeer, he would send me a picture maybe every 5 days of the progress, and I was like, wow, this thing is a work of art.
It's a long process. You can't hurry it. It takes a long time to cut a mold.
Like what he created, you know, I was expecting it was just going to be one piece, but it ends up how he printed it. He put a gate in it, and you could print two at one time.
We got the mold back in about a month, which is quite amazing. Normally in industry, you get a 3-month window, but they really went after it and got it done quick.
One of the instructors there was waiting with Brian, and they pulled that thing out of my truck, and they were like, wow, this is a nice tool. And I was like, that's what I thought too. It took them a couple hours to bolt the thing into that huge machine. Within a couple hours, those guys were banging out. It was like full production.
We made 45,000 plus head frames within the first 4 months. So, and these frames got sent all over the world.
The way the whole thing spawned from one email, it was almost like a miracle. But the amount of people that did pop up, provide professional support.
And I don't know how many hours they worked, but they saved lives with that.
Ferris Plastic's been going on for 35 years now, I think it is, and we pop up all over. You know, if there's a plastic plant, somebody's there that has a connection to Ferris. And that's how things got motivated. Somebody knew somebody that knew somebody, and we made things happen.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good day. You too. I think that there was, maybe some optimism, on the part of the university, thinking that, okay, if we can just make it to summer, this will all go away. And I kept telling people it will not all go away. We're going to need to, stay on top of this.
A week before fall semester began, we really didn't have a testing program at Ferris. In July, all the media, all the literature said you shouldn't be doing testing. And it became clear to me in the middle of August that we had to have a testing program.
Because over the pandemic, really the focus of testing has changed. Early on, it was important to find positive individuals who are symptomatic and isolate them. So we could do contact tracing and we could quarantine individuals. Because at that point in time, we were not able to get any of the antigen tests. I was able to find a bunch of analyzers, but the company was not able to sell us tests at that point in time because they were in such high demand and short supply.
Well, so when I was brought back to Ferris after being laid off, it was like a week before move-in for the fall. So at that point, we're still trying to figure out what does this look like to be bringing students back on campus.
About a week before the students came back to school, and we were able to partner with a company in Kalamazoo called G-Markers.
They had that expertise right there. And so within a week, we're testing everybody who was moving into our residence halls. And at that point, those were $100 a test. It took us 24 hours to get the results. But you think about how much that was a game changer for us.
Early on, the team had already been looking into different point of care rapid testing that we would be able to utilize.
I guess it was spring of 2021, we were finally able to get a less expensive test, the Abbott Binax Now. So that was a difference of about $20 a test for the BD Veritor versus $5 a test for the Abbott test. So that was able to allow us to continue doing the amount of testing that we were doing and probably even expand that.
We really tapped into people who were experts on our campus.
My students were ready to go with respect to specimen collection, knowing how to use the test. And that's why when they asked for volunteers, a lot of people from the College of Pharmacy were able to step up and really help out with this.
There was testing that was done for athletes in the morning, and then it would open up to the general public. So we would go in, we would kind of help facilitate that. So we'd set up in the morning. Once students and public both kept coming in, we would instruct them on how to swab. They would hand it back to us, and after X amount of minutes, we would run it through a computer system that would give us a result.
It was definitely a different world for me. I mean, it's a different world for everybody, right, with COVID, but that, I'll say, more pharmacy area was not my background. My job was more figuring out the workflow for how we use this and potentially have hundreds of people coming through over the course of a few hours that we can test safely and effectively and get those results out as needed.
I think a lot of it is this feeling of being kind of constantly on edge. Myself and a lot of my friends have kind of talked about this COVID anxiety. It's this, oh, a friend of a friend of a friend tested positive. What do I do now?
I have so many things that I plan for the futures. So dying is not an option right now. I would say it plainly like that. So that is my utmost fear. That's why I have an anxiety of touching anything, because I don't want to catch it easy.
I've had COVID a couple times actually. So I know that COVID is not fun to have. It was not a good experience.
I miss not feeling the anxiety of COVID everywhere that I turn.
I went in on a Friday, which I think was New Year's Eve, and into Grand Rapids. I was there for a week, and on a Monday, I ended up getting a doctor that was in charge of the COVID ward. He came in on Monday, and he talked to me and said, "You're a long hauler, so you've had COVID for 7 weeks, and we need to do this, this, and this to get you better." And they took care of me, so I spent 7 days there and was very sick. But physically, it just takes up to a year, they say.
I've been very impressed by how quickly some decisions have been made, to help stop the spread of infection, implement testing, and so forth. I think that the university, from faculty, student level, all the way up to the president, have done a very admirable job.
I had gone into pharmacy and healthcare to hope to help people and to leave an impact and have an impact on others. To have had an impact on, and even though it was a big group of us, a handful of us, it still feels really rewarding knowing that I was able to help with it.
And thank goodness we had that, because we could not have stayed open without a testing regimen.
Ferris pharmacists dropped what they were doing, the health center dropped what they were doing, and people moved heaven and earth.
Why'd you choose Ferris?
I think Ferris chose me. I had a brother that went to college here and visited when I was younger. Spent a couple weeks here, and beautiful place in the world.
I think we started it pretty much when COVID started. Gotta get that important part in there, so I know what's in that hole. It's opening manholes. And pulling the sampling machines out. And then changing out the machines, changing batteries, and then resetting for the next date. To me, it's revolutionary that they can test that through the sewer samples. You know, I'm not sure on the sciencey part of it, but you know, if this is my part to get them to where they're going, then it's just a great thing. It can only be a good thing, you know, get it under control and get our life back to where it should be. I think we're all waiting for that day.
It still kind of baffles me to know that I'm a part of something so large. Nowhere else is doing what we're doing. This room up here is the COVID lab where we do like all of our processing of the samples. This part takes about 3 hours from start to finishing the stirring. Once we put it in the centrifuges, that itself takes an hour and a half. We go from having proteins and basically everything that's in that wastewater in our sample, and we run it through a membrane that just takes off the RNA. So then we're just looking at specifically RNA.
August 19th, I was notified through an email from my department chair, Beth Zimmer, that the Ferris wanted to start testing wastewater for the SARS-CoV-2 virus as a means to keep the campus open during the school year. So in a matter of one day, actually a half a day, we completely turned around the direction of the lab to focus on this wastewater testing.
Just in general, like right when COVID started, I was getting ready to graduate college, so obviously that was a little stressful. And trying to find a job at that point, difficult, because there's just no one's hiring because no one can work, and you're trying to find something that allows you to be in an area, but it's just not working out for you. And I talked to Dr. Pike, and like basically within a week I was working in here and starting off as like the lead, learning everything so that I could train the next group of people. That one is Composite 3.
To see them to be able to be involved in this at the technology level is really cool. Cassidy, my technician, who's a former student, she's got a very good shot at going to the state police forensic laboratory as a forensic scientist because she's part of this new technology. I think there are other students here will have similar opportunities.
Well, this was actually my first year here at Ferris. I graduated from high school in 2020, so in the midst of the beginning of COVID and everything. So I had to make a decision and I ended up choosing Ferris. I've really enjoyed it for the fact that most people, their first year, don't get this kind of experience in a lab, and I feel like it's really helped me learn and understand things I normally wouldn't for when I go into future classes and they start talking about stuff that I've already done here. I'll have better understanding of what it is.
Heather was a freshman straight out of high school, and she was, you know, how should I say this, up to her eyeballs in wastewater. So, I mean, but she was involved in this and was involved in this new technology and helping keep this university open through that cutting edge technology.
And it is kind of interesting because we are looking at these samples and basically allows us to see the COVID before you might even know you have it.
So this is kind of a frontline warning system.
And by doing so, it's allowing us to track it and catch it before it even has a chance to spread outside of that location. But after Halloween, we had a very large spike in just about everywhere, assuming, you know, Halloween parties kind of play a role in that. But we were able to catch it and kind of say which areas really were the big problem and prevent it from spreading too far after that.
Because we're catching it before people are symptomatic, so they're able to do testing and help people quarantine before it becomes an issue.
I'm excited to see my students. I think as a professor we want our students to exceed what even we do. And I'm excited for them because this is a new piece of technology that when I was in even graduate school, we weren't even dreaming of this. I'm just overseeing things, I'm mostly administrative, but the students and Cassie, the technician, are the ones that have really done the work, and they've kept this going and operational. It's really these students and the experience and the hands-on education they get that is so pertinent to the Ferris experience is second to none.
It's very enjoyable. It's actually the work that I'm really interested in. I like doing the hands-on work, and so being upstairs doing the processing, being down here making the plates, being over in the pharmacy building doing the cell culturing, I just love it.
It makes me feel like important, and kind of like everything that I've done up until this point was for a reason and it worked out for me. So kind of just made me feel very validated in what I chose to do with my life, I guess.
We're excited to be working with our colleagues here at Ferris and with our colleagues across the state of Michigan and across the U.S. and across the world on this new technology.
In the beginning, I think a lot of people either had difficulty wrapping their head around it or maybe just didn't necessarily believe it, but as time has gone on, I think people have come to realize that it is something serious. My priority in the beginning was I wanted to make sure that our residence halls were ready for the fall, no matter what the fall looked like. At that point in time, there were many uncertainties.
What we're experiencing this year is doing all touch points, so it's just like multiplied a lot, and you're concentrating on that more than anything else. I've been told thank you by a few students, and that's very nice. I've had a few say, thank you for watching out for us. Thank you for picking up after us. Thank you for keeping our study room tables wiped down.
We thought it prudent to be a little proactive. I initiated an all-staff, basically, an enhanced disinfection program that we did where we basically had the access to all the buildings with no classes going on. And really what that had amounted to was diverting all of our attention to mass disinfection.
I think about, I don't want anybody getting sick, so I keep doing it. If it helps, then that is wonderful, and I surely hope that it does help.
This truly is a team effort. There are some fine people. They have a lot of pride when it comes to their work. And it really showed, I think, over this last year.
I've seen it. I've seen people be sick from it. I know we have had it in this building, but for the most part, the students have been good about it. They've did their quarantining. If they've had to do isolation, they've did that as well. Rooms have gotten disinfected, and everybody's just tried to stay on top of it and keep it in control as best they can.
One thing that I'm hopeful that comes out of this is that the university as a whole understands the role that we do play here for everyone.
So you do what you can do. Get it, make sure you get it, do a thorough job on it, and do it the next day again.
Until today, the GLIAC was Michigan's last hope of seeing college football this fall.
Another domino has fallen.
The GLIAC will not be playing any fall or winter sports this year.
So Grand Valley, Ferris State, and Davenport have suspended all sports competition until January 1, 2021.
It's been tough. It's really tested us as student athletes. With soccer specifically, our entire fall was pretty much non-contact, so it was a lot of conditioning and lifting and that kind of stuff.
It's been a difficult year. as it has been for everybody. I think for me personally, it's been one of the most challenging, and I think a lot of that has been related to, my season getting canceled in the fall.
We were about 3/4 of the way down to Indianapolis when we got the word that the NCAA tournament was canceled. So we turned the bus around and came back to Big Rapids. And so I remember being on the bus at that time, and we were talking in general about, what's going to happen? When are we going to have sports again? And I remember saying, I just hope we have football in the fall. And then as things started to develop over the course of the latter part of spring and then into summer, the outlook for a football season became increasingly bleak.
So we get to the gym at Drury, where we were playing at, and we get in the locker room, and all of a sudden it comes across our phones that the NCAA tournament's been canceled for Division I. So we knew kind of that it was coming down, but still attempting to be hopeful, I guess. And then slowly our coaches walked into the locker room as we're tying our shoes and announced that we all knew what was coming, and also explained we still have an hour of our time to be together, so we're not going to end early. So we still, after we found out, we went out there, practiced, and for that hour it felt like we were about to play GV and the next day, and so many emotions off the court after that. So you walk off and you do all the work to get to the tournament just for it to be canceled. So it was heartbreaking, but we made the most of it for sure.
We got to campus in August, and I didn't have a single class in person, and I didn't have any soccer, and so many progressions where it just didn't feel like anything that I'd ever experienced, especially because this is my 4th year. I'm a senior, and that was pretty crushing.
Just as the summer progressed, I was more nervous because I saw my senior season just being taken away from me.
It was just heart-wrenching. My heart went out to the seniors because that was the last time that I was ever going to be able to play with these girls, and I played against one of our seniors in high school, and that was the last time I would ever get to play with her, so it was really sad.
First game I actually didn't get to play because I was contact traced, so I had to sit out the first game. It really took away from kind of my development, I feel like, a little bit with not being able to skate and practice with the team.
Because one positive test can potentially take the entire team down, and it doesn't really matter if you think that you were within 6 feet of the positive test or not, and it doesn't matter if you're asymptomatic and you test positive or not. Like, there's just so much anxiety surrounding it.
Roll through your back.
Your Saturdays become suddenly empty because you're used to waking up on a Saturday morning and either you're getting ready to head over to Top Taggart Field for a Ferris home game or you're getting ready to go on the road. And for the first fall in probably 25 years, I did not go to a single football game in person. And I was not on the radio. I was not covering Ferris football for the first time, I think, since 1995. So it was kind of odd not to have that huge part of my life be taking place on Saturdays. And so Saturdays became empty.
Like this season, I was just like, hey, we lost a season. Like, I want to win. Like, let's get after the season. And I know that a lot of girls spent a lot of time in the off season just working and perfecting their craft of softball. And that was like the biggest thing for me, is that we all wanted to play when we got on campus this year.
We all kind of have a common goal, and we wanted to achieve a goal this year. Obviously, it wasn't the season that we all wanted this year, but I think we did get better at the end. Like we all stuck together. No one kind of jumped ship. So I think next year is going to be a good year, and hopefully things can kind of go back to normal.
I'm just really proud of how our team has handled the adversity that we faced. We really have put the team first and sacrificed a lot, and I think it's paid off. So I'm just really excited for GLIAC competition to start because I think it's going to be really good.
Like, I can't even put into words how thankful I was to be able to play this semester, but in the same breath, how disappointing and heartbreaking last semester was, which makes this semester, I guess, all the more important and makes it even more fun that my team is doing so well right now.
More now when I look back at it, I'm just grateful for the experience that we went through it together, and it brought us all closer.
It's great to see them continue and to have that Bulldog pride. And so we were looking at football spring game and saying, hey, this is an opportunity to get the fans to be able to come back and see some sports. And fans are hungry for sports. I mean, they were really hungry for sports. And so we started to look at the spring game and think, we can make this really, really big. And that's what it actually turned into. And it was really great to see the fans really come out and to see the student athletes get a chance to perform after missing a full fall season.
36-yard line, Cummins again to the air and almost intercepted here. Good coverage on the outside.
A year ago, we settled on a couple of protocols, all this equipment that the kids are intimate with, they're checking in, they're checking out. How are we going to make it safe for them? And I came across UVC light as being a way to sanitize things. And I said, well, I have a box truck that I could use. And so that became the standard. We hung UVC lights inside of our box truck and cooked the equipment for 30 minutes. And so that's been working really well.
We came into fall kind of knowing that anything could happen. We had made a bunch of arrangements to be able to resume some face-to-face.
So we were actually the first classrooms on campus to get plexiglass barriers.
We looked at masks. You know, we ended up with all of our Bulldog masks, and then we had finding ways to mitigate COVID in the classroom. So the plastic barriers that went up and 6 feet distances. Physical plant spent time in every single classroom with some folks in academic affairs trying to figure out who could fit in a room. How does that work?
We had social distancing elements put in place, but we also went into it knowing that we had to be flexible in a way I don't think it ever occurred to us before we needed to be flexible.
I was definitely happy that classes were at least semi-in-person because I knew a lot of different colleges were completely online.
With nursing, well, even though that a lot of things can still be done online, the in-person component, I feel like it's really important to be next to the student and saying, okay, let's walk through this task. Let's walk through this sterile technique on how we don these sterile gloves. The relationship that we develop with the students, being there in person, and there's not as much of a rush to leave.
I had an ecology class this semester, and my professor, he was just so great and genuine, and I could just tell that he loved being back in the classroom, and it rubbed off on his students because I loved going to that class, and that was definitely one of the highlights of my semester.
How are we today, Zoom?
Before all of this, if I would ever be able to lecture by standing still in one place behind that monitor, like they would have laughed you out of the room. I don't hide behind a desk. I'm out here, I'm moving around so I can see each face, and I just feel bad because I told students they'd have a face-to-face, you know, they had that option, but it still isn't really the face-to-face experience that they would normally have in my classroom.
In order to start putting together weather systems and to talk about
One thing is clear, it's that we're all human, and everybody has been impacted by this pandemic in one way or another. And we have all dealt with loss.
I guess the thing that's the hardest about all of this is the loss piece, because for those who lost people who from COVID or who now are very ill, that's the part we can't ever fix. We can't bring those individuals back.
What I've learned from this crisis is we have to be a lot more engaged with the rest of the world, not less.
It's gonna be 2 years since I last went home if I go this Christmas. So it's definitely gonna be weird. I have a younger brother that used to be shorter than me, and he's already taller than me.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned from COVID, and learn more about myself and self-improvement, because that whole year was you're not doing anything really. You're just at home by yourself. So, learn new skills, learn how to cook, so.
The best part out of this whole conversation is now people know public health, right? Prior to this, it was what's public health? Nobody knew about it, right? And so, for the students, it was a great experience because like people started asking them, their immediate family, their family members, their relationships, they all started, hey, what does this mean? What does that mean? And now we got a conversation going because of public health.
Making changes in higher education is like turning a cruise ship, right? Sometimes you first have to turn the rudder and then wait a while for it to catch up. And that's not always a good thing in higher education. And we proved at Ferris in March and April and May that we can be nimble and we can be flexible.
I hate the pandemic. I absolutely hate it. But I think that they're going to have more writing experience. They're going to have more thinking experience.
I can't wait in the fall to be back and to see some of the students that I've only ever met via Zoom.
The knowledge of, okay, I can go through something that is already designed to be challenging in situations that make it a whole lot more difficult on a personal but also on a functional level, is a good takeaway for me. This ability to sort of persevere.
I couldn't imagine having to deal with all of this 2 years ago, and here we are. We're in the middle of a pandemic, hopefully on the end of it, but we don't know. And having to deal with all those things have been difficult.
We were more united in many ways because we had this common problem that we had to fight to get through and basically save the university.
When I look back, I'm so proud of us as a community and all the people who did all of that work. And it was everybody. Everybody had a part in it.
So many heroes, so many people who went above and beyond, did whatever they could, used their skills to help us be safe and make a difference for others and make certain that our students receive their education.
It was hard, it was scary, it was painful. But my gosh, if I don't go through some hard, some scary, some painful things, how will I ever be able to stand in front of a classroom and tell my students that they can go through it if I haven't gone through it myself? So I felt as if it was my own training camp. It was my opportunity to sharpen my pencils. It was my opportunity to toughen up, because now I know without any doubt that it can be done. And I know it from experience, and I can teach from that experience. So I'm all good.